there is the opportunity for it to come down to like Priest versus Warlock, right? Where almost you can make the Priest as greedy as you want and you're still going to lose that matchup.
Yeah, and I know you like accuracy, so I will just point out, before you get shouted at, that Yala actually did make it work. Boston won with Rogue and Warrior, and then Yala just slayed the Priest 3 times in a row. And it didn't actually look close, but in general, the point still stands. But yeah.
Oh, I know what happened. It's because in my head he didn't kill the water elemental, right? Like in my head I have that logged as a Priest win because he should have played the Elucia turn properly, but he threw instead. You see? You see how that works?
Imagine, guys, the scrutiny I'm under when we're practicing, when Sol just decides if you make a small misplay, you've lost the game. That's how we practice over in EU. But
yes, you are correct. I misspoke. I apologize.
Let's dive into this game, though. It is the Rogue, which is pretty much the standard Miracle list you all expect and see, versus this Control Warrior from Viper. And although I think in APAC we saw the Rogue take a victory versus the Warrior with some help from Alex Straza, in general, I think this is a very tough matchup for the Rogue, especially versus Viper's list that has a bit of a beefier minion count in the mid-game.
Yeah, those minions are no bad thing, honestly, throughout the mid-game as you're talking about. South Sea Scoundrel is a little bit weird in this matchup, I would say, just because I think the Rogue cards are all very naturally synergistic with the Rogue deck. Like that dual-sided draw is very one-sided, I would say, in most occasions. But outside of that, just the Scrap Golem, the Shield Maiden, and so on, they do represent a decent amount of stall throughout the mid-game, as long as there's not exactly massive prize plunderer to deal with it immediately. But really what this tends to come down to more often than not is just kill minions, gain armor, and then try and land Bulwark at a timely turn to start locking out that Alex Straza combo at the end of the game.
So far, though, Thijs has got off to a pretty solid opening, right?
Yes.
He's got the Octo, it's not procced, of course. He gets the another minion on curve into Kazakas, into Golem now. So he has got off to a fairly aggressive start. And this is, for me at least, Sol, the weakness of Control Warrior is that sometimes you don't have the right clear for the board that's been given to you, right? Like you don't have the right shape AoE to deal with what's going on, and then suddenly you've took one big swing of damage, and then later down the line you take another one, and then you're on like 12 health, and you've got to just not die.
I do respect this Outrider's Axe coming down a lot, though, especially since the Corsair Cash did land on it. I saw Shaxi in APAC doing very strange things that Jir and Derek were kind of debating back and forth on, just to deliberately engineer minions to 3 health breakpoints, so Outrider's Axe could start coming down and drawing some cards. Because I do think just staying high on resources, even though it's not a value matchup, you do want to cycle your deck to just find maximum brawls, Barovs, Rankers, Bulwark of Azeroth, which you already has, of course, but you do need to be digging through your deck as much as possible.
Yeah, Blade Storm's big ones too as well, because again, a lot of the rogues, as well as Rancor being good, a lot of the rogue boards do have more or less the same health, so Blade Storm can get it done. But Viper having that brawl now into the Golem turn is at least going to be a stalling moment. He does leave a Golem up. One of the rare occasions that I actually think Viper would have been very happy with the Octo actually being the one surviving.
Yeah, he might have been initially happy and then perhaps sad if the right draw had come off the top, because this is the juice of a hand to discount with Octobot on the other side. But as it stands at the moment, no way to self-proc for Thijs. I think you're absolutely right. I think Viper, first and foremost, is just concerned about taking too much damage right now. And I think Thijs is spot on to recognize just the flow of the matchup and just go for the throat here, right? Just strike while he can smell weakness and just push damage as aggressively as he can.
And does that mean an Apexis Blast choice, Sottle?
I mean, it could, but Potion of Illusion is so scammy in this matchup. Like, the things that you can do with, like, Potion on a Tenwu, for example, just to be able to get 2 Tenwus, like Potion a Tenwu, Shadow Step a Tenwu, that jacks your damage output so high in the late game that if it gets to that point, this is one of the best matchups and one of the only generically good matchups for Potion of Illusion, I would say. But, as I was saying at the time, I think Thijs is just smelling the momentum of the match, right? And just saying, I don't need to get to Alex Straza Tenwu times anytime soon. I just need to go for damage right now. So I can definitely respect the Apexis Blast there.
Viper does have a couple of ways to clear this up. He can just Blade Storm Coerce if he really wants here. He could... potentially go a little bit different. He could use the coin and maybe go Rancor Bladestorm and go that way.
Yes.
He's got a few options. He could even be a little bit riskier and try and get something more out of the hand, like actually get a weapon swing in as well to kill like the 1/2 for an additional draw.
Mm-hmm. He can also be... There's some like weirdly inefficient plays which save different resources. Like you could just coin Coerce down the center, right? And then still use Bladestorm to clear up if you wanted to, but that obviously floats a mana. You just need to combo the Coerce first in that play, and the coin's the only card you can do that with. It does preserve a Rancor, but yeah, I think just doing it this way makes a lot of sense.
All you want really as Control Warrior in this point is just one turn to breathe, and then like Viper can drop the Scrap Golem, can start to just build up a board, maybe even land the Bulwark if he's that afraid of such high aggression. But he just needs that one turn where he's a little bit free to do so. But after clearing those Golems, you've got to think any board Thijs makes is just Rancored all over the show, right? It's just going to get absolutely obliterated, and armor gain from Viper.
I'm curious about not taking the card draw that turn, though, even with the Bladestorm clear, because it was still available, right? If he wanted to just take 1 damage, draw a card.
Quiet.
Do you think he's just super afraid of any damage whatsoever because he knows his opponent just picked a mage spell?
I think he absolutely is, yeah. It's just whether or not... Like, it's that old life coach formula of, like, he would argue that a Warlock tap gains you health on average because of the cards that you played in your deck. It's that kind of deal, right? When you have Shield Maidens and Second Rancor and so on left in your deck, like, is drawing cards actually more valuable in terms of preserving health? But maybe Viper just saying with the Bulwark locked up already, he doesn't necessarily need to cycle super hard.
Yeah, and I think because he has even a couple of turns worth of removal, and he's probably feeling okay, and Thijs is feeling feisty here as he just chucks the stab to the face, puts Viper on 9.
This is going to be a very different game from the one that we just witnessed between Alatemu and Give Please, where it went all the way down late to fatigue. I think Thijs has very much set his stall out here. He is all in early. I think if this push does get shut down, he will very quickly collapse, but he is extremely close.
Yeah, Viper might...
It's done before turn 8 at this point.
He might be cashing this weapon in now. Oh, okay, that's big. But what do you like just Rancor Bulwark here?
I don't think the Bulwark is necessary anymore. I think now with that draw, like the Rancor Armor Vendor hero power is just so perfect, and I think that should still be perfectly clean, even against any given random mage spell in the hand from Thijs. Because he'll go to 11, he'll go to 15, he'll go to 17, so even like Fireball's second stab doesn't get there, right?
Yeah, and I guess the more I think about it, if that mage spell is exactly Mask, then your Bulwark achieves like almost nothing, it feels like a lot of the time, right? Yeah. So, yeah, I can see it, actually, yeah.
Yeah, you almost want to see what the mage spell is before you play the Bulwark, right? It's that classic dynamic game of chicken from the Mage Mirror. Sorry, from the Mage versus Warrior matchup, I should say.
I don't know, Mage can probably generate a Bulwark somehow, so it could happen.
They'll find a way. Actually, can, right? They can just get War Cash, it's easy.
Oh, yeah. Bit of a low roll there from Jandis. Do you... well, I imagine Thijs is going to commit a Shadow Step here.
Yeah, I expect so. Again, I think Gia and Derek had a much harder job of it because the way the game was laid out for Alatemu, it was a much tougher decision whether to do things like Shadow Step or Jandis, because obviously a Shadow Step used cuts into late game Alexstrasza combo damage.
Yeah.
Thijs very clearly is not on that plan, so there's no real decision to be made, I would say here. He's just playing max tempo, it's the only thing he can do.
And now just staring at Viper's hand, I think he'll really want to get this Scrap Golem down this turn, if at all possible. Just that if it dies, then he can just N'Zoth straight away into another one. Could be a potential plan, depending on what he draws next, of course.
Fair. Oh, second Rancor is very good, though.
Well, he can still, like, poke Rancor Coin Golem.
True, yeah. I was considering even Eye of N'Zoth this turn, because you know there's currently 2 1-health minions. You can even value trade the 2-1, right? And then hope that the eye hits minions 5 times. That might be too ambitious now that I think about it.
I just think, like, getting the second Rancor, you know it's going to gain, like, 2 armor. It's going to hit twice, gain 2 procs, and then he can get Scrap Golem. I think that's more than enough, right? Because then he can start doing, like, the weapons, or even, like you said, go for that N'Zoth next turn.
Juicy. So doing it this way does... Ooh. Yeah, so doing it this way increased his chances of hitting minions, right? Because he left a 3rd minion on the board for at least 1 extra shot. But it gave him the downside of having to trade the 1-3 into the 4-4 like this.
Yeah.
The disaster happened. I think on average, Viper's way of playing that the eye play was better than what I suggested. I did rule it out as perhaps too risky, and Viper did get hit with that risk, but I think on average he was within his rights to expect it to go better than what actually happened there.
And by doing so, he knows, of course, that Jandis got Shadow Stepped, so now he can just Rancor Coerce, for example, this turn to deal with the majority of the threats as well. So he's still going to have use for that Rancor. I don't think there's many rogue turns in existence where Rancor wouldn't be good.
Not really, no. It'd have to be like this Jandis, but the left minion is the 1-1 death rattle,
right?
Or something similar to that. Like it was... Because Rancor Coerce, as it turns out, is just a perfect answer to the second Jandis. I don't think he quite could have planned for this, because I believe the Coerce was drawn from the weapon swing, right? After he committed to the play, but certainly the way it's lined up, he has a very clean answer now to the second Jandis.
Thijs picking up Stuart. His chances at more damage. But sort of, this might just be the turn, honestly. Although there's still a lot of damage available for Thijs, like this might just be too strong.
Agreed. And as I mentioned earlier, because of the way Thijs has played it, which isn't a criticism, it's just kind of the natural byproduct of the way that he chose to approach the matchup. If the stabilization starts to happen from Viper, he will very slowly collapse, because I think having used so many of his resources with Wicked Stab #1 and a Shadow Step gone already, his max damage output later on is significantly reduced. And now we'll start to see Viper stacking armor, because he still has these Bulwark turns in which he can play a Rancor, he can play Crush Lord of Turtling, new card from Wailing Caverns, he can play Scrap Golem even, all of which are going to stack him extra armor on top of this total and start pulling him out of range.
And then after all that, Thijs kills it all, he thinks he's got a chance, and then the N'Zoth comes down and summons the turtle again, summons the Scrap Golem again, and it just gets worse.
Just checking to see whether Viper is playing Sourfang. He is not. Okay, that's worth knowing, of course, because that's another instant armor burst that you can pick up after you've had Crash die, because of Sourfang proccing the Frenzy minions immediately.
There was even actually an interesting point there, right? He could have coined the turtle that turn if he really wanted to.
Wait, what? No? No. No?
Wait. What?
He had to go, if he went Rancor Coerce, if he doesn't do both of those cards, there's like a 7-5 or 7-6 left on the board, right?
Right, I just mean it would frenzy the turtle if it traded, and if it goes face, there's a Bulwark up, right? So I'm just saying,
okay, so you're actually just leaving the Earth element.
Yeah. I just mean like there wouldn't really have been a big punish outside of it either takes a charge off your Bulwark or hits the turtle and procs it anyway.
You and I have very different definitions of what a big punish is, Raven. 7 damage sounds like a big punish to me.
But it wouldn't be 7.
Choose soon. Care to make a wager, friend?
Here though. Thijs has got almost nothing to work with. No value, no nothing, and a Shadow Step and a Dream right now. Can he coin the turtle now? That's my question.
Or just coin it for no reason to start of turn.
Yes,
Coin the turtle.
yes, that's what I want to see. Who cares about the Scrap Golem?
Yep. It looks like this board is going to spell the end for the Bulwark now, which Viper did try and protect. I mean, you are right. As much as I mock, I take your point, of course. But I think Viper's considering himself to be in a strong enough position where he can continue to play around weird niche outs, like the mask we keep talking about, being randomly generated from the mage spell, right? So I think it was wise to clear it up, all things considered. But he is now in a position where he is a little bit limited on AoE.
And just has a lot of mana to spend, right? Which is what my consideration was about last turn, is that you just get a 6-drop out your hand, and then you can still do 5-drop Coerce or whatever the turn after.
That's fair.
Shield Slam double 5? No? Wow, okay.
I love this. I absolutely adore this. I think this is a play nowhere near enough people do spot with enough regularity. Is just the ability to say, I spend 9 mana this turn in order to put the card Ysera Awakens in my hand, right? I think it's massively underrated, because the problem with Viper's hand right now is that he just doesn't have AoE. So he can take this turn to just say, all right, no big deal, no real damage done. I'm going to use this turn to buffer through my Bulwark, and then I'm just going to get Ysera Awakens in my hand. So the next board that comes down, I can just clear it up, no problem, and then probably just drop the long-awaited Lord of Turtling down alongside that. I really like this line.
A charming composition.
Little unsure on the weapon into the minion, with all of that considered, right? Because you do use up 2 charges doing it that way instead of 1. In comparison to just letting the minion hit you and then you clear it up next turn with Ysera Awakens anyway. Kind of feels like you might have just saved 1 health or saved a charge, whichever way you want to look at it, that way around. But I don't think it's a big difference, and Viper probably has upsides in mind that he's thought about.
Care to make a wager, friend?
Well, Thijs has a course of his own, so he can at least bat away this big dragon on board. And rebuild a board of his own. Is that going to be Wicked Stab, I think?
Trying to carve through this armor as best he can. Viper now down to 12, but still no significant discount in hand for Thijs. So the threat of damage in 1 turn at this point is limited to 1 unknown mage spell and just a single Alexstrasza at this point from Viper's perspective. He knows nothing cheaty can be done with the Alex in terms of mana discounts at this point.
Yeah, well, and 1 rogue spell that was generated, which could be Wicked Stab, right? I mean, we can see it's Deadly Poison, but he did just see the Steward get played.
You're absolutely right, yeah. Or Sinister Strike, I suppose, as well.
What now?
And although he has the AoE, which again I do agree with you on the Ysera play, this is kind of the result of what I was talking about earlier, where Crash Frenzy gains armor and goes in the N'Zoth pool. Scrap Golem, when it's a taunt and when it dies, it gains armor and goes in the N'Zoth pool. Like, if these had already been played this game, you could argue what the game would even look like at that point, obviously, but then N'Zoth to create a taunt and a minion that would frenzy into an additional 8 armor would be live. Of course, Viper now has that Ysera Awakens to proc the Crash. The joy of that minion having so much health is you can proc it with almost any AoE in the game.
Yep. I do think he had this in mind, right? Because when I was describing it, I kind of deliberately just said Ysera Awakens, drop the Crash in that order, right? Because that is the order you want to do it. But if you're under any kind of panic, as Viper was there a little bit because of the 7 damage Wicked Stab going to face, you can just do it in the other order and just get yourself that instant security blanket. So I certainly think this was an eventuality that Viper had planned for.
And Thijs is just struggling now, honestly. Because he'll just know, like, the second that Crash goes down, like, yes, he gained the armor, but then it could be resummoned. There could just be more than that coming soon as well. There is that Scrap Golem still in hand, but there is also the fear of N'Zoth, which now has, what, the Crash and the Alex in it? The Ysera, sorry, the Ysera, not Alex.
wonder.
Viper again could just kill off this Neophyte and then go Scrap Golem Emerald. Wouldn't be able to squeeze in an armor up though, so maybe there's value to actually Laughing Sister hero power, just to get that extra 2 health that he kind of loses 3 on the attack if he wants to go that way.
You kind of have to stop and count every turn as well, right? It's like, now that I've played the Crash, now that I've played the Alex, like, what does every turn look like if I just jam N'Zoth, right? How often do I die in those scenarios? The here he'd attack, he'd go down to 14, so there would need to be 11 damage following that up from the other side. Probably a little risky, and yeah, just getting the Scrap Golem down first, as you were describing, does give you that additional buffer then, going into your N'Zoth turn when it comes down.
Because now all he's really thinking about, okay, well it changes a little bit now because of Enraged Mancrit, but the whole, like, Alex Straza plus a mage spell across, like, two turns, like, what can that look like, and is that damage recoverable, right? If he gets dealt 8 and then gets put down pretty low, can he armor up to dodge an Apexis Blast, a Fireball, and mask in some circumstances as well, so...
Mm-hmm. It's even like 10 with a Mancrit at this point for Thijs.
I wouldn't hate it. I wouldn't hate it. But is he just thinking of the Alex? For like, Alex Shadow Step, Alex Tenwu?
Choose soon.
Possible, right? Like, now he's got all the way to this point. Like, it's so many turns. It's the problem. Because there's only 2 natural cards left in his deck at this point, so as long as he draws Alex Straza next turn, he gets to do it all relatively quickly.
And it's not like, yes, there's the fear of the armor, but it's not like he's dead next turn if Viper makes the board, right? He's got plenty of health.
Right.
Oh, well, this just gets interesting.
Does, yeah. Viper, I believe you've already made this mistake once.
Yeah,
so don't
again.
do that again. Yeah. For those of you who aren't familiar with what we're talking about, Mancrit's Wife casts when drawn, very specifically worded on the card. So if you discover it via other means, such as South Sea Scoundrel, they draw theirs and it casts. You did not draw yours, you discovered yours, or you took it from your opponent. So it does not cast, it just sits in your hand.
And suddenly, now that the N'Zoth has finally landed, the Scrap Golem, the Crash, like, this is the turn where Viper pulls out in front, right?
That's the bad draw as well, Raven. The Swindle. It's not a charging 3/7, and it's not an Alex Straza, which means now he cannot play Alex Straza this turn, even though he gets access to all the draws, which slows down his win condition by an entire turn.
Wait. So, what if he goes Tenwu, the Mancrit, play the Mancrit, and then Shadow Step the Tenwu the next turn, Alex Straza, Tenwu, Alex Straza?
Ooh, I like that.
Because that's still what I would call a lot of damage.
It is, yeah. So it's 3 damage again immediately next turn, plus 16 immediately from the Alex Straza follow-up on the next turn. You don't get the Apexis Blast cast at that point, so you miss out on 5 damage. In this case, it's 3 damage that you miss out on because he Apexis Blasted the minion and then went face with the 3/4. So that is kind of interesting. So it looks like he is going to go with all here altogether and still going to go with the Shadow Step. Yeah. It's a good spot. I really like this line.
It makes sense. I didn't actually factor in the Crash Frenzy to work out what that looks like, but still, it's as good a line as Thijs is going to get at this point.
The Crash takes him to 20. It's the armor up, though, right? That's 22, as long as the board is cleared. And then with 3 damage from the Mancrit coming out, plus 16 from the Alex Strazas, plus 1 from the dagger, Thijs can only do 20.
And also, Viper can Shield Slam, armor up, and then Body of Cthulhu, right, to even stop the dagger.
Yep.
Crash is a good card. Just letting everyone know.
Justin Wong, Lord of Turtling, finally making his way into Hearthstone.
I understand that reference.
Do you actually? How deep do you understand that reference?
Probably not as deep as possible, but deep enough.
But you know who Justin was.
No, I... Trying to think, I didn't miss you yesterday.
Yep.
But yeah, here's the plan, and again, I like Thijs going for this. It's just, unless I've counted wrong, not going to be enough, right?
And the cycle of life is reborn anew.
I think he's pressing the button to follow this all up. Yes, he is.
Oh, wow. You see Viper there, sigh of relief, and that's also regardless of it being about this single game, but just how important actually the series is for these players, right? Like, this is a spot at Worlds on the line. They want to get these wins done. They want to get to tomorrow as quickly and smoothly as possible. But really good win there for Viper, and I think it just shows the power of that control warrior, as we can see that, like, Viper still had 10 cards left, and Thijs literally threw every card in his deck at him, and Viper still came out on top.
Yeah, and I don't think it was really, one-sided in terms of draws or RNG outcomes or anything like that, right? Like you saw there, Viper got very unlucky with the initial brawl, which is a 5-5 landing at that point. But I do think he drew very well in the top half of his deck in terms of just having a good mix of threats, armor gain, and removal just to be able to get things through. So I think it was a fairly generic outcome between the two decks.
Right.
And you saw Control Warrior just being able to survive overall. Thijs got very, very close, right? Like, as I said, he was off to a very aggressive start, and he used things like Shadow Step and Wicked Stab very aggressively to try and secure the game early. But because he was able to do 15, 16, 18 damage early in the game, he then needed less damage to close out the game later on, right? Because if Viper had just done all that same stuff, but Thijs had played a bit more passively, just drawn through his deck, picked up combo pieces, etc., Viper would have been hanging out at 50, 60 effective health at that point with all the armor stacked up on top, right? And then how on earth do you get that done with Tenwu's and Alex Straz's? So I do like the way that Thijs approached it, really going for the throw early. I think particularly triggered by that 5-5 surviving brawl, but in the end, Viper just able to do just enough with a couple of creative lines in the mid-game. I still particularly like just greeding the Ysera a little bit, greeding the damage to get the Ysera into playing and loading up that Ysera Awakens. Really like that line overall. So, well played to Viper. I think a deserved first game win.
Yeah, game number 1 is going to go to Viper. We're just waiting for the players to choose what deck they want to lock in next. But just take a look now. Viper's just going to have this Warlock and Paladin left over. And again, the win with the Warlock feels very doable because there's a mirror match, there's a priest, and then, okay, we won't talk about Rogue. But there's a mirror match and a priest in there. For me, it's this Paladin and where the Paladin actually lies, because I still don't think many of us have made our mind up about Viper's Paladin list and just that kind of Paladin in general as to where the strengths lie, what does it lose to, what does it win to, or if you Sol, it just loses to every single thing, in your opinion. So it's just... That's the one I'd be worried about if I was Viper right now.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I like that he's playing Seed Cloud Buckler in there. I really like that card. I couldn't find a home for it just yet, but I'm fairly sure at some point there's a deck with Seed Cloud Buckler plus Party Up plus 26 other cards, right? That has to be a fairly powerful combination at some point, especially while Conviction exists, right? Just generic Bubble Paladin plus buffs just seems like an idea that it might work in some point in the near future.
The other day on ladder, I played against a effectively token Paladin, like a dude Paladin. He played the Give Everything Divine Shield, all the tokens, he and played all the, summon 5/1/1s and so on, Stand Against Darkness and such. And it was actually a bit of a problem, because then you realize, if these always have Divine Shield, and then you just press Conviction twice, you're nearly dead. Conviction as well, obviously with Party Up, as you mentioned, with either Stealth, Wind Fury, so on. So pretty dangerous overall. But Thijs is going to be locking in his Priest for this game, and we are going to go over to that Paladin as well for Viper.
Okay, I'm very interested in this one now, because obviously a big crux of this series is whether Thijs can get the Priest out of it. Which means it kind of matters in result what the Priest ends up playing. It's not like it matters in terms of queue order, but the actual matchup that you end up playing can have an impact. And I think, you know, facing down the N'Zoth Paladin is probably preferable to facing the Warlock eventually. But if the Priest were to lose here, of course, it then almost guarantees that the Priest is going to have to take on the Warlock at some point in the series if it's going to get out. So, you know, slice it whichever way you want. But these are two unnaturally greedy versions of the decks that they're playing, with Archdruid Naralex coming into the deck for Viper. He seems to be a fan on that card, which opinion is largely split on. I was putting it just generically in basically every deck I built for the first little while I was playing, and then slowly cut it down time after time. I still play it in Evolve Shaman just because I think it's great to have a minion that just wakes up and can't be dealt with on the turn that you play it, so then you just naturally have another minion in play that you can evolve, which is great. But I do think you kind of need some specific reasoning to include that card in your deck. I do think just relying on the dream card generation is a bit too inconsistent for my liking.
I can offer you one for Paladin if you'd like one.
Go on.
The sheer just lack of card draw generally for Paladin means that you can probably just make use of even the lesser Ysera dream cards that you would want in a perfect scenario. So I think, again, in a deck where you're not expecting to be able to cycle through it so quickly, that just having one card basically become 3 in a roundabout way could just be worth something.
Yeah, I do think now with the nerf to Hand of Adal, like, you still feel like you have to play Hand of Adal because of that resource reasoning that you're talking about, but you're so sad when you play it now most of the time that it does feel like it's nice to have some cards with extra resources.
Just giving you guys a reminder of what the N'Zoth cards look like. We will get that moved in just a second. Already though, Viper getting off to a decent start. Like he does have that kind of good early curve, right? And a mixture and menagerie of card draw in the form of the Knight of Anointment, the Murloc, the Sword of the Fallen, effectively card draw, and that Naralex.
Yeah, and happy to coin going into 2/2 with Sword and the follow-up, and then curving into Naralex from there, which is a really strong opening, honestly. And Thijs here already considering what it looks like to respond to this with Sethic. It seems a little sketchy on surface because I think you know that the 2/2 curve does involve Sword of the Fallen most of the time, and that's what your opponent is doing. However, Thijs just has Raise Dead in his hand, right? So he has that Priest luxury of not really having to care about whether his Sethic dies in this spot.
Now the real question is, in a perfect world, I think he would want to like palm reading this turn as well, but which one would he have done first? Obviously now he knows it's not Oh My Yogg, so he doesn't have to worry too much about that choice anymore.
Hello?
Again.
Obviously not getting much of a discount if you end up with the Raise Dead here, but still seems a little bit more effective than the other choices. Okay. Goes with the Ruin instead. I guess his hand is already starting to get a little bit minion congested, which is certainly a problem that N'Zoth Priest can run into. So I guess he's just saying, okay, we'll take some removal here just so I don't get clogged down just playing one big idiot every single turn, which does make sense.
This is also one of the few decks I really wouldn't want to play Salty Scoundrel into, right? Because like Paladin will just love the fact you're letting them draw cards, right?
True. They are another N'Zoth deck, though. It is certainly worth thinking about, right? So there is a lot of cards in their deck that do naturally synergize with what you're trying to do as well.
May the light.
Not in the least a second N'Zoth, if you can hit the absolute dream.
Kind of tough there, right? I'm not saying it's strictly wrong, but it's easy to say now that I almost do force myself to just swing in no matter what first before I draw a card, because drawing a Secret Light Reckoning is just heartbreaking, honestly, at this point.
It is, yeah. It's weird because it seems like a problem that can just never be avoided, right? It used to be Avenge back when it was the more aggressive secrets that were being played, and then Avenge got cut, and you're like, okay, maybe I won't draw my secrets off the 1/1 anymore, and suddenly Reckoning comes into the deck. Oh, God. Can you just stop putting the holy tag on secrets, please?
Gonna triple trade, okay. I was trying to work out whether Viper was gonna just be okay just throwing a Nightmare into this Sethic. I wouldn't have hated it, honestly. Huh.
Wow.
What were you saying about that synergy stuff?
I mean, giving your minions Divine Shield doesn't sound terrible.
You've got to get them on the board first.
Yeah, that's fair. I do like it though. I think the other two, obviously, the 3/4 was just a 3/4. You'd just be taking a spider tank. There's almost no world where that ends up paying off. I do think Hand of Adal has some upside for you, but yeah, I think taking the buckler there makes the most sense.
There is now the option to Nightmare trade and then just go Emerald Drake Reckoning, which would be seems like a pretty solid turn here for Viper.
Yeah, he hit the Emerald Drake while trying to tempo, which is a very big deal here. It's kind of what I was talking about early on, where it can be a little bit inconsistent. Like, sometimes you're curving out and you just play it on turn 3, and you really just want Drake to play on 4, right? And instead it gives you Ysera Awakens, and you're ahead, and then that's useless. Sometimes the reverse is true. You're behind, and you play it for a Hail Mary looking for some removal. You want Dream or Awakens, and it just hands you an Emerald Drake, and you just can't spend 4 mana playing a minion that does nothing at that point. So the cards are very evenly split between reactive and proactive, which I think makes it a little bit tricky overall.
So awfully tempting to press Conviction here. I think for Viper it's so much damage, and he could just trade away this Mage Scribe.
Is he even considering leaving it there? So he just moused over Reckoning, right? Which is, it's kind of tempting. Just to say I have no interest in dealing with this.
Yeah, I think the problem part though is just giving Thijs spells, right? Like, what if he just plays Conviction, trades, and then just has a Carousel Griffin as well as the Naralax?
Yeah, it depends how greedy you want to be, right? The problem is it's just one too few mana this turn, because I think if you could perhaps like play Reckoning and then play Dragonmaw Skystalker, you'd be more tempted to go for the ignore the Mage Scribe turn, because at least then you achieved something this turn, which is corrupting the Carousel Griffin by playing a more expensive card. But if you have to spend 1 mana on anything, it's probably worth just doing it on the Conviction and clearing up, I think.
I'm going to go a little bit of a different direction here. Does retain the minions, of course, and now gets that Sea Cloud Buckler live.
Who was it that said we were practicing that this looks like the second shield you get in an RPG? That's one of the most accurate statements I've ever heard in my life.
It's also accurate because it's true in the game.
Is it actually? Oh, okay.
So Wailing Caverns is like a level 15 to 19, maybe 20-ish dungeon. And considering in Vanilla WoW many years back, the max level was 60, then yes, it's effectively like the second Horde dungeon you go to. So yeah, it does.
It's so true, right? Like, your first shield is just a straight up like wooden buckler, and then someone breathes fire on you and it just burns, and you're like, oh no, I don't have a shield anymore. And then da-da-da-da, you have reinforced metal shield. Yay!
I do love the way in this story a dragon like breathing fire on your shield when it's made of wood is bad, but you put a little ring of steel around it, oh, that'll stop it.
That's literally how JRPGs work. Yeah.
I know it is, but it's still funny.
Yeah. Thijs does manage to clear up this turn, but the Galloping Savior has been activated. Okay, Gia just confirming in Discord that that was her and that she would like credit, and I will always give credit where it is due.
That
Unlike
horse.
Gia and Daruk earlier, talking about the genius of Evolve Shaman and not crediting the creator.
Galloping Savior horse didn't used to have armor on it, but then it got breathed on by a dragon. It got upgraded.
And then they paid like 1,600 Microsoft credits and got... I can't even remember what the Xbox Live currency was called. It was so long ago at this point.
Bad, I think was the word.
Yeah.
Here though, Thijs just trying to fight back. It's one of the benefits of that Galloping Savior is if it gets procced in the unfortunate circumstance where you can't deal with it that turn, it does just keep the initiative flowing, right, for the Paladin. Viper just gets even more damage pushed, and then he gets to just continue on, and Thijs just has a lot of minions. Like, doesn't really have the tricks he needs to get through this. Even Shadowword Ruin, just, it kills the 5/6, but there's still 6 damage minimum, plus the weapon coming through next turn.
Yeah. We've seen this a lot, honestly, with the N'Zoth Priest games that we've seen so far in Grandmasters playoffs. Throwdown was pointing it out a lot in the Americas region, and rightly so, that it just seemed like the hand was getting very congested with expensive minions, and that they just didn't have that kind of fluid route through their turns like the cheaper priests tend to be, right? Like, I know we've had this conversation a lot when we test that, like, priest is ridiculous because you can curve out at 4 and still just never run out of cards by just having this incredible chain of opening boxes basically every turn. And that becomes very difficult to do when you also pack your deck with these expensive minions, and that does seem to be a bit of a problem that the priests are running into.
And also a very visible difference between these two decks, right? Both in the N'Zoth decks, both are running kind of clunky minions to make N'Zoth good, but the Paladin plans to be the aggressor, whereas the priest does not generally plan to be the aggressor, right? So suddenly the clunkier on curve or like whatever minions don't do the same job for priest as they are doing for Viper.
Right.
Even look at this, right? Just Viper being okay shipping that much damage because he just doesn't want Thijs to have anything, right? He just doesn't want him to have anything he can build the board with.
The buckler was just so sick there. Just so, like, totally free trades.
Yep.
Divine Shield just absolutely gobbling up Thijs' board. Viper, taking a punt with a new card in one of his decks based on limited testing. And so far, sample size of 1. Paid out pretty big for him.
And look, even like Shadowword Ruin and then Heal, great. There's still 9 power on board, plus 8. Still enough cards in Viper's hand. And also enough... Ooh. Yeah, I think I was right with you. Enough mana to go Kazaka's 5-drop Golem plus 2/2, right?
But then, did plans change? No, they didn't. Ooh. Summon a copy's probably
yeah, I guess you just take copy and be okay with it.
Yep.
After just seeing the Shadow Word come down.
Thijs does play a natural Soul Mirror in his deck, but your board is still fairly resilient to Soul Mirror. Bunch of 3/4s, Divine Shield. Seems fine. Outside of that, obviously, there's the Heart that we can see in hand. Outside of that, no Condemn in the deck for Thijs. So limited ways, honestly, to deal the small amount of damage needed to change the breakpoints here.
And then Thijs just shaking the head, hoping that Elucia can do something here because his hand certainly cannot.
And that is largely a brick. Reckoning does allow the damage to go through, so that's not going to reduce any damage. Righteous Protector can put a wall in the way, but he knows he's given Ysera Dream over to his opponent on the other side, so that really doesn't get you very far. And
not if he can't play
his opponent an extra horse.
Yeah, he can do whatever he wants, right? He could have even Hysteria'd that 1/1 if he wanted to.
Yep.
That looks like enough damage.
Yep, lethal left up on board from Thijs. Just really could not get started with the Priest. As I said, I think Viper has a very clean target Priest strategy. Obviously, I'm not a huge fan of N'Zoth Paladin, but I think when you're expecting your opponent to bring Greedy Priest, Greedy Paladin beats Greedy Priest weirdly by being faster than the Priest, which is kind of an unusual way of looking at it. But it's kind of this, it's a faster deck that still doesn't run out of steam, right? It's right in that porridge sweet spot where it's not too cold, not too hot. It's just the perfect temperature of deck to be able to stick a board, never run out of resources, and just beat up on the Priest on the inside.
And also all the new card additions as well from Viper seem to be pretty decent, right? The I can't even say it now. Seed Cloud, not Cloud Seed. Seed Cloud Buckler paying off for him with their really strong trades there on that turn, and as well just the Narrowlax just giving him some decent stuff to do. The Nightmare was good for the trade early on. The Emerald Drake came down and allowed even more pressure to come down too. So seems to be pretty good from Viper. Like you said, 1 game sample size, but tick the boxes so far.
Yeah. Seed Cloud Buckler, though, I think in general just low-key MVP, right? Like by how much he won the game by, it doesn't look like one card could have made that big of a difference. But the fact that he just allowed him to free trade with such a giant minion on the other side of the board, because otherwise he has to start thinking about, well, do I trade into this? Do I just ship face and allow Apotheosis to come down and maybe just completely reset the game from that point? One thing which we didn't go into detail about yet, which now Thijs has moved off of his Priest, probably a slightly more inappropriate time to mention it, but one of my least favorite things about Thijs' lineup is that he's just cut Blademaster from Priest. Yeah. So his ability to swing back from that exact kind of position that we were looking at from Viper's side with Blademaster Apo is just not there, which I think is another reason why Viper got to play so carefree that matchup, right? Just wide board at all times, just max out on minions and go face. I do think that's a bit of a hole and a bit of a weakness in Thijs' lineup overall, but we'll get back to that a little bit later on, because we have moved on now to the Control Warlock from Thijs, which I believe, if I've been keeping track of things correctly, Raven, means we're going to be hitting the Control Warlock mirror.
Yes, and silly things could happen. Viper, as usual, bringing his own couple of twists on the cards here. Unstable Shadow Blast, along with his Narrowlax and a Headmaster Kel'Thuzad in his Warlock for some shenanigans. But most importantly there, the Tickatus is there, the Mutanus is there, and that potential interaction is there, along with some other key cards such as Ysera. So we might see some our first foray into Mutanus silliness, Sottle.
Yeah, and it's actually very interesting. I've played 0 games of Control Warlock this expansion. There's just, not enough time to have played everything by this point. But I have watched a good amount of Control Warlock, and I've seen even a few Control Warlock mirrors. And it very quickly becomes important how right you are to point out that interaction, because it's vital on so many levels, the Mutanus versus Tickatus interaction, because players will just slam Mutanus because it corrupts the Tickatus that they have in their hand already. So they really want to do that as quickly as possible, but they have the opportunity to then just eat the Tickatus from the opposing side. On that note, do you in that case then wait until you see a 7 or 8 mana card played from your opponent, so you get some indication that they've just corrupted their Tickatus, so it might be in hand, and then you slam your Mutanus? Right. But if you're doing that and your opponent is also doing that, then both of you are sitting there not playing your Murloc, which would corrupt your Tickatus, because you're waiting for your opponent to corrupt their Tickatus first. It's a bit weird.
We talked about this yesterday a little bit, but it was the Priest versus the Warlock discussion. And I said, look, I'm sure someone will work out some intricate ideas about how to do it, but for me,
it's me.
if a Warlock has played a 7-cost card, you play Mutanus. That is, if you miss, you miss. Who cares? But when it comes down to the mirror, I still think it is correct to just do the powerful thing first, right? Which is proc that Tickatus and play Tickatus. That's where I land on it, at least.
Yeah, I think ideally, you look at Viper's hand right now, like ideally he'd like to draw Tickatus, play Sociologist, and then play his Tickatus as quickly as possible, right? To reduce the window where Thijs can draw and play Mutanus on the other side. But sometimes that just isn't a reality. Sometimes you do just get stuck in this weird spot where your only card to corrupt the Tickatus is the Mutanus in your own hand. I think that's one of probably the trickiest iterations to play.
There's also something that's already happening now by Thijs playing out this armor vendor, for example. Like, one thing to consider is Mutanus doesn't get to pick which minion to eat, right? So there is certain value in holding maybe an extra minion or two in hand, if possible, to say, okay, well, there's just more of a chance it eats this 1/3 than it does my actual game-winning card.
Yeah, we saw that last night in America's series between Muzzy and No Hands, where Muzzy generated extra Mutanus from Angling Rod in Paladin and played Mutanus twice while there were 3 minions, I believe, in No Hands' hand. There was a Green Rag, a N'Zoth, and a garbage minion on 2 consecutive turns, and he hit the garbage minion both times.
I do love as well. Oh, go on.
I was going to say, the scriptwriters just really, really wanted No Hands to win that series, but even they could not overcome the power of the Muzz in the end.
I do love that, like, I think the first time I brought it up, I was like, oh, you can get Mutanus from Angling Rod. And you were like, oh, yeah, you can. And then, like, a few days later, I was like, I think you had Angling Rod equipped. And I was like,
yes.
Hey, you never know, you could get Mutanus. And you were like, oh, yeah, you can. And I was like,
yeah.
Oh. Interaction will never get old, it seems.
Nope.
Yeah, though, so far, we haven't really been talking about the plays, but they've been pretty tame. Thijs just playing out a couple of minions with the Armor Vendor and Lucky Do. Viper just getting that Narrowlex, and it's a card I completely get in almost any control deck, right? If you put Narrowlex in it, I understand. It's more stuff. But in Warlock, when you tap in a lot, it's like, ugh,
yeah.
Ugh, can I hold all these cards?
Yeah, and you can already see here Viper kind of having to double dip on removal and not tap here just to make enough room for another dream card to be generated. Not tapping means not getting closer to Tickatus, which could be a problem. Because obviously we've talked about the race to Tickatus in terms of corrupting it, playing it yourself. We've also talked about the danger Tickatus is in when it's in your hand to opposing Mutanus. But the classic dynamic is Tickatus is in danger when it's in your deck because of the threat of Tickatus on the other side, right? So I think most of the time you do want to draw as quickly as possible to be able to pick up those cards.
Viper did get the ultimate combo though, right? So there is a chance we get to see some fireworks here.
You talking about Headmaster Awakens?
Yeah, especially because he could be playing it after the militia turn from Thijs.
Oh, true.
Yeah,
that is pretty sick.
Headmaster Kel'Thuzad just being over the health threshold of having 6 instead of 5 makes that combo pretty sick.
As soon as you said ultimate combo, I looked at Nightmare in the hand for Viper, and my head went to Wyra's Control Shaman, who Wyra, after building an inferior version of Evolved Shaman to mine, moved on to Control Shaman, and he has a built-in OTK in his deck, as he said, where if you just hit Nightmare at any point from Narrowlex, you have an OTK by just having Alakir and Diligent Note Taker in your deck, and you
sure.
Which is like, it's just such a cute piece of deck building that I just absolutely respect. Like, it's just such a good idea.
And the thing is, there's just like a factual like percentage of time that will just happen, right?
Yes.
It's not like a super wild, crazy thing to go on. It just will happen in X amount of games.
Yep.
Oh. Well, there's Tickatus and there's a 7-drop.
I mean, that could not have been timed any more perfectly, could it? Not only is this fantastic for Thijs, it's fantastic for us because it's led us down this path of just absolute potential chaos now. The being drawn on curve so you can slam Sociologist and corrupt the Tickatus meant that the Sociologist came down, and now we're in this spot where Viper has decisions to make as to what is the good play this turn.
I wonder.
Because that Awakens is so clutch in a turn or two with that head, with the Kel'Thuzad. He doesn't want to play currently his own Sociologist because it's one of his only realistic cards for corrupting his own Tickatus if he draws it. He's only a turn away from Jiraxxus from this point, I suppose, but he will want to jam Jiraxxus on curve a lot of the time, which will then leave his hand stranded without a card to corrupt a Tickatus if it's drawn. So Sociologist is a very valuable card in his hand right now just for corruption reasons.
Yeah, what if he just Hysterias the Militia? Is that just good enough? You kill like 3 minions on this board, leave 2 3/3s up?
Yeah, you could chuck a Drain Soul in with that as well if you really wanted to, but then you're giving up some Tamsin value. Oh, it's so sad. It's so sad, Raven. I wanted to see the cool thing happen.
Me too.
Yeah.
But some people would argue this is a cool thing.
Who are those people?
Idiots. That's who.
Yala.
Okay, I'm not calling Yala an idiot. Well, most importantly, though, I don't really think Viper had anything dramatic burnt, right? 2 strongmen, a Spirit Jailer, an Armor Vendor, and a Cascading.
Yep.
That's not bad. Obviously, you don't really want to lose the strongmen, but this matchup isn't won by them either.
They are kind of nice for that that final like Yasharaj board push, but yeah, if you're gonna offer someone those 5 cards to get burned off Tickatus, they'll probably take it. The only, I guess, real point of contention for Viper would be that he has 4 soul fragments in his deck and he didn't get any of those burned to the Tickatus, which, you know, kind of feels a little bit unlucky, but yeah, did not lose anything matchup defining there for sure. Problem is, his opponent is just so far ahead of him now in terms of progression through the game plan, right? Having already played his first Tickatus.
Yeah, but there is still now the chance. Viper has the ability to do the win the game in the other way, right? He can go Jiraxis, have Siphon Soul for 0 if this Strongman comes down from Thijs, and then can start just churning out 6/6 Infernals every single turn. With the weapon and then with Nightmare, things can escalate pretty quickly.
Strength. Arms of strength.
And
There
honestly,
is soul fragment number 1. Okay.
if you ask me who I would rather be in this game right now, regardless of Viper being 2-0 up, I think I would rather be Viper landing this Jiraxis.
Oh. I think it's close. Give me like
definitely
give
close.
me this Jiraxis with a Tickatus also in hand still. Yes, sign me up. But the fact that he's still not corrupted his Tickatus is a real problem at this point, I think.
That was awfully close to just give me better cards than my opponent, and you know what? I'll agree with you.
I mean, yes.
That's obvious. Oh, is this going to be on the Yasharaj? Kalthazad, okay. Not the end of the world.
Yeah, we saw Thijs throw out the prayer hands there as he tapped into the Yasharaj. That's the card he wants to protect, and I think he is expecting to be Tickatus this turn, which is why he threw out the Mutanus there. Obviously, there's other big targets he can hit, like the Yasharaj, for example, but I think because he saw the Jiraxis come down, that to his mind is the first card that has come down that could have corrupted the Tickatus. Therefore, he was expecting Tickatus to be slammed this turn, so he was super happy to have picked up the Yasharaj off the top and protected it in his own hand. Let's not forget, though, that it is not 100% safe in that hand anymore. There is a giant munchy Murloc that can still come along and take care of it.
How shall I destroy you?
Viper has a few ways to deal with this. Even at worst, he could double Siphon, but probably wants to retain one at least. Looks like he's going to go for the trade into Drain Soul hero power here.
Yeah. And I do like this. I think this is an important facet of the matchup that doesn't get talked about a lot, where in control matchups, you don't just necessarily want to do 24 to face with your weapon. You kind of just want to use it for board control and get value out of it because you're such a resilient deck with the amount of healing you have from Soul Fragments and Siphon Soul and Drain Soul and everything else that you can generally afford to do that.
But here's the ouchie time.
That is the correct reaction, Viper. Mutanus down. And... oh, it's still there! It's still there, Raven.
Viper's
There
like,
are 6 cards in Viper's deck. 4 of them are real, 2 of them are Soul Fragments. 1 of them is Tickatus.
yep.
That's the one.
He just still has 0 mana Siphon. He has the Nightmare as well.
Yep, still has 2 Soul Fragments left as well, so this Sociologist is actually a reasonable play this turn to corrupt the Tickatus.
And he knows, obviously, Thijs has already used his Mutanus, right?
Yep. Have you noticed that all the card names in this matchup sound really dumb when you say a lot of them in a row?
Tickatus, Mutanus, Maximus.
Yeah, exactly.
Sounds like some kind of Roman gladiator.
My name is Tickatus Maximus Decimus Meridius.
I wonder.
I'm a fan of him just using his Siphon Soul here.
Somewhere about 40 miles away, I heard the sound of Darroch opening Photoshop.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it. Oh, okay. Viper just holding on to this Siphon Soul and saying, you know what, I'll just face tank this.
That's kind of what I'm talking about, right? Just use the weapon for board control. Max out that value, max out that greed. This is such a slim percentage pan out from where we were in the game like 2 turns ago. For Thijs to have just already basically completed his game plan of playing Tickatus twice, and Viper just basically still has all the matchup defining tools left remaining to him. He still has Tickatus and Ysera.
Is the deja vu going on here, Sol? I feel like this has happened before, where Thijs was playing Warlock in a mirror.
Yeah, okay.
And he did the Tickatus thing twice, and his opponent didn't, and he still lost.
Oh, that might be true now.
I'm pretty sure that's happened this season.
It's ringing a bell. Armor Vendor pickup does open up some Silas lines here. Just for Thijs to fight more aggressively for board control. But this is why Viper using his health as a resource with the weapon and holding on for that 0 mana Siphon Soul for as long as possible is so important, right? Because he knows he has these greedy turns still to go with Tickatus and with Ysera, where he doesn't have much mana flexibility outside of that to defend.
Oh.
So having that 0 mana Siphon to go along with either of those turns is pretty huge.
Well, even now he has Unstable Bolt, right? So he can just kill the 6/6, trade in the weapon and the 1/3 into Silas. Tickatus, hero power, seems good.
How shall I destroy you?
Silas, Mutanus, Tickatus, Maximus.
And then at the end it's Ysera. Don't ask
Yes.
about that one.
Yeah. Yeah. That name was passed down from my grandfather's side of the family. We don't talk about them.
I wonder.
Now, if Viper burns Jiraxxus, what are the odds on Thijs having a chance to win this?
Fairly slim, I would say. It will depend a little because there's now 5 soul fragments. There's now 4 soul fragments. Sorry, checking. There are 4 soul fragments left in Thijs' deck at this point. So if the Tickatus actually hits soul fragments for Thijs, as they largely did not for Viper, that affects the final fatigue counter if it does resolve down to that point, right? Where even if Thijs does lose Jiraxxus, he might just be able to hold on for that extra turn or two while fatigue resolves. But yeah, the window is certainly closing, I would say, for Thijs overall.
And even the fact that Viper didn't just play the Tickatus, of course there are fragments he could burn, but every turn is a turn where Thijs can draw, say, Jiraxxus. But it also just shows that Viper's just ahead anyway, right? Just as on-board basic Hearthstone game plan here of just having bigger minions on board more often.
It's running out of cards.
He's just saying, I don't really want to get twisting nethered right now, right? Like, I just have so much pressure on board that I'm just going to make Thijs have to do something. It's not necessarily the case because Thijs has a pretty gas hand in terms of dealing with boards like this. Like, he still has his own Tamsin Siphon Soul to be able to fall back on here and not have to use a twisting nether.
And just a fully buffed Cascading as well, right?
I wonder.
Is now the time?
Yeah, personally, I don't really feel like this is enough pressure to justify it. So I think I also would have done it last turn. Ooh, 2! No Jiraxxus and 2 soul fragments. That is a very bad Tickatus outcome for Viper. Of course, if it's clear that the difference between burning a soul fragment and burning a real card is bigger than just it's an ineffectual card that you have burned, it is straight up just less cards burned from the deck, because when a soul fragment gets drawn, it draws another card. So in terms of when an opponent will die to fatigue or run out of cards, like, it's essentially only burning half a card if you want to look at it that way.
This is pretty huge though, right? Because he's made a board big enough that Thijs has to respond to this. He cannot leave this board, and then Viper can just say, okay, Ysera, burn again. There goes the deck. -2 cards, I guess.
Yeah, 2 cards are still soul fragments at this point for Thijs. So again, this could go one of two ways for Viper from this position.
Well, Fell Lord looks like the only real card that you can even pick.
Yeah, for sure. There is still that 2-card buffer here for Thijs at this point. 2 opportunities to protect his Jiraxxus. 2 soul fragments that can just play the body block here.
I'm out of cards!
Siphon and weapon. And look at the greed on that 0-mana Siphon is just so clutch at this point as well, right? Like, just held onto it and held onto it and held onto it, and it's paying out so big right now. But this is the moment, boom! First try. Soul Fragment still remaining, which means Thijs hits Fatigue essentially on the same turn that Viper does, but without a Jiraxxus to his name, and that is looking like a clean 3-0 here from Viper. I mean, wind me back in if you can, Raven. Can you see anything from here?
I am looking, and no. The main issue is all the removal is there, right? Thijs could last a while here with this removal he's got in hand, but Thijs has to know that there's at least 1 Twisted Nether, so there goes the Enslaved, and then there's Tamsin, right? There's no other minions, so there's actually no minion pressure for Thijs to actually kill Viper with, whereas Viper gets to Twisted Nether that 1 threat, and then hero power for the rest of the game and win. So I think if Thijs has like just quickly calculated everything that's left and what can happen, he knows he's lost, but in a game like this, I have no qualms with him actually just playing out a few more turns just to see how it looks and if this Fell Lord dies or not.
Yeah, I agree. I think he has solvably lost this game of Hearthstone. It's a little bit trickier because he knows that Viper has 0 healing and he has a lot because he has Tamsin, Siphon, Drain Soul, right? Which he can rebuy a bunch of, but I think the overwhelming power of 6/6s cancel that out very quickly.
Not even that, right? What if Viper just kills this and just doesn't play any more minions for the rest of the game?
True.
Because with 3 charges of the weapon and more health right now, he will win in Fatigue, right? Because there'll be like Thijs can Drain Soul his own Tamsin once, and that's it.
Yeah, you could even just like hero power Hysteria here, which clears both minions, right?
Sure.
And then that preserves a Twisting Net. I don't know why you need to preserve a Twisting Nether. You don't. I'm just naming things that you can do because there's nothing else to talk about at this point in the game. But Viper going through the rigmarole, it is solvable from this point, as we've mentioned. The important thing is this is not Priest, right? There's not just a legion of created by garbage that you have to account for. It's not like the matchup where Alan started to take notes for 3 seconds and then gave up.
No Rustwicks involved as well, right?
Yes, also true, yeah. But
funnily
Viper
enough,
is just going to play the vanilla line here, which does give over the healing potential to Thijs. But again, I'm not entirely sure it's relevant.
It's funny though as well, right? Because Thijs did pick Demonic Studies earlier on, so Rustwicks could have been a factor in this game.
Fair, yeah.
But he got the Fell Lord instead.
Mm-hmm. So how many 6/6s can Thijs actually kill? He can kill 2 more from this point, right? He can kill 3.
3 more.
From this point, yeah.
Wait. 4 more. Right? He can Tamsin, Drain Soul, and then... Oh yeah, or Siphon. I was looking at Tamsin, Drain Soul for 2 mana, Drain Soul for 2 mana, and then Soul Share his own Tamsin to get 2 more Drain Souls. Would that work? No, okay, maybe that doesn't work out. A couple. There you go, that's all you need to know. You can kill a couple.
Like, I don't think it matters, but as I'm starting to like count the healing coming through from Thijs and the fact that Viper is, even though they're on the same turn of Fatigue, Viper is fatiguing first, the amount of healing and the 2 extra soul fragments do start to become relevant for Thijs, which brings me back around to the play no minions idea that we floated a few turns ago.
Viper does have 3 weapon swings and the soul fragments of himself though, because he's got Spirit Jailer.
Yes.
But yeah, like we can see now, if you just never press the button again, he just wins, right?
So many
But
possibilities.
honestly, in a matchup like this, with all sorts of cards burnt and so on, it can be difficult to just stay on top of that stuff.
Haven't heard of me? You will.
So I guess now there's an additional reason for Viper to not play any more minions, right? Because he will know 2 out of the 3 cards are spells. So unless that 3rd card is a minion, which Viper should know it's not, Viper can trade and then just pass.
Again, I don't think it matters though, right? Because again, if you're accounting for what can happen on the other side, you press the button once, Thijs kills it, you press the button again, it lives, and you just have a 6/6 from that point, right? So like that just also wins at this point.
It gets to Hysteria as well, this, which makes sense, right? You can put 3 more damage to the face instead.
Yeah, Thijs is going to get a good old chunk of healing here, but the 6/6s are just going to add up far too quickly from this point, I believe. I think Viper will just have a moment's pause. He survives 6 and 7 from this point, and then dies to 8. Still true, even with these 2 soul fragments healing.
Is it true with the armor vendor, though?
The armor vendor gives him an extra turn.
Yeah.
Whether or not that gives Thijs an extra turn or not, I have not counted yet.
Because the extra turn, he could have, like, 2 attacking Infernos, right?
Yes.
Which...
I wonder.
But yeah, he just fatigued for 5, so 6, 7, 8 is 21, and he has 2 soul fragments in his deck, so he is at 21. So currently the armor vendor means that he would die on the 9 fatigue tick instead of the 8 fatigue tick. So that does get him a whole extra turn. And even without counting it, logic kind of dictates an extra turn is better for him.
Yeah, because he has 6/6s.
Because he
can
has
attack.
6/6s.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. But I only counted one side. I'm sure Viper, with the luxury of not having to speak out loud, has counted both sides in this position. And if he's playing it, I'm confident that he's got it right.
I'm out of cards. My deck is running out of cards.
So down 2 soul fragments, heal him back up to 25. He goes face, makes another 6/6, and I think he just has straight up lethal next turn at this point, right?
I believe so. Yeah, he's going to have, what, 13 from the minions. Thijs takes, is he on 5 or 6 now?
It's 6 this turn, 7 next.
Yeah. Wow, that's just game, that's just series. Thijs concedes finally here, and Viper 3-0 Subtle. What a way to start the day, and what a way for Viper to start this run towards the final day of playoffs.
Yeah, he actually tweeted out right before we went live that, you know, was the storyline ever Viper goes to Worlds, or was it just another 0-2 crushing defeat? And that obviously he'd love to go to Worlds, but he felt like the worst storyline for him was he makes it to Sunday and then doesn't make it, so he'd rather know one way or the other today.
Right.
Unfortunately, I'm not at liberty to divulge our script, early. Like, you just got to wait how it plans out. But as you can see now, Step 1, Chapter 1, Act 1 is Viper crushing Thijs in a 3-0 victory with his super greedy anti-control lineup, even without having access to his Demon Hunter, which, as I said, went, I believe, 13-1 in testing against Thijs' lineup.
And also, all the while, not bringing Priest, which, the majority of the players think is just a given because the class is so strong right now.
I just realized that was, like, Viper just did a perfect hold on, we've got a badass over here pose as the opponent dropped the Tickatus on curve, but inexplicably, he managed to dodge burns like Neo in the Matrix dodging bullets to the point where he still had the perfect win condition assembled in the remainder of his deck and actually managed to hit the Jiraxxus on the other side. He was probably like 10% in that matchup at a certain point. Like, if you snapshot a particular turn, right, probably somewhere in the region of 10% to win that game, but then everything everything just went in his favor from that point. He was able to then execute on that, play the iteration where he won incredibly well, get himself over the line in that very complex late game fatigue scenario where I think there were 6 or 7 different ways to win from that point, but he picked one of them and he executed it very nicely.
Was that on purpose? Because that was very funny. I don't know if you saw what I saw, but it was just the Inferno like 3-4 times in a row as part of the replay. Maybe it skipped, I don't know. It was very funny though, but yeah, I'm with you, Viper. Really